thumbs up from the back.
Good evening, members of the board. It's time to call our meeting of the Oakville Public Library Board to order for Thursday, the 22nd of April. Members of the board, good evening. Are there any regrets, Madam Committee Clerk?
We have no regrets, but it appears that we're missing a couple folks. Perhaps they'll join us.
Perhaps they'll join us. Hopefully they will. Members of the board, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest to declare at this time? I'm hearing crickets, so we'll move on. We have our confirmation of, we have our minutes, 3.1 and 3.2 that have been circulated with our agenda package. Would anybody like to move those for me or suggest errors or omissions? Janet, do you have a comment or are you moving?
I just wondered if Tara could confirm if the Conservation Halton, was it just a couple of days in order for them to book an appointment, or was it a week? I thought I heard a week, and the only reason it's moot is there's been some people who have asked the question about Fast Pass, and I understood that it was going to take upwards of a week to get a reservation at Conservation Halton. If that's the case, if we could just adjust that in the minutes, I'd appreciate it.
I think I said it could take up to a week. It really does depend on the day of the week. So Saturdays and Sundays tend to be more popular. So depending on when you're looking to book, you may not get that Saturday. You'd have to book for the next Saturday. So that was really what I was speaking to, because it really does. Somebody who wants to go Wednesday morning is much more likely to get that availability than another day, particularly on the weekend.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Thank you. Would you be kind enough to move the adoption of the minutes, please? Janet? Sure. Okay. Seconded by Susan. Thank you very much. Any last chance for comments, questions, errors, or omissions? No. Good evening, Bill. Any objections to the approval of the minutes? Seeing none, those are approved. Members of the board, we have 4 items on our consent agenda. Are there any members of the board who wish to separate any of the items, 4.1 through 4.4? Janet?
4.4 I'd like to speak to
Sure. Okay.
in particular.
How about 4.1, 4.2, and 4.3? Anybody?
Oh, good.
Okay, can somebody move those for me, please? Thank you. Stephen and Andrew? Last chance for comments or questions on 1, 2, and 3? There being none, are there any objections to the adoption of the staff recommendations in 4.1, 4.2, 4.3? Seeing none, those are approved. 4.4, Janet, you got the floor.
So I just wanted a clarification. It is the employee population that the metrics are based on. Does it include the part-timers?
It does, yes.
Okay, thanks very much. That was my only question.
Okay, can I count on you to move that item then, please?
Yes.
Thank you. It's been moved, seconded by Pankage. Thank you very much. Comments, questions? Any objections? That matter is approved. We have nothing on our confidential consent placeholder here, but we do move into our discussion items, and we start out with 6.1, which is the 2000, and this is probably, depending on how recently you updated your eScribe, it could be, you may have these reversed, but 6.1 that we're dealing with tonight is the 2020 Oakville Public Library financial statements. So who is going to lead us through this?
That would be me, Councillor Knoll. Can you see me on your screen?
Hi, Jonathan.
Good evening, everybody. And thank you for having me tonight. And as Councillor Knoll said, we've got items 6.1 and 6.2, which depending on the agenda, they both relate to the financial statements. One is the approval of the financials by the board, and the other is the receipt of the audit findings report from KPMG. So I will say a couple words first about the financial statements, and then I will pass it over to KPMG to give their report. So looking at the financial statements, there's a couple of items that I would like to draw to your attention. There are a few more items mentioned in the staff report, but I'll keep my comments to just a few items that I'd like to highlight for you. The first is actually on page, I believe it's 3. If you go down to, actually you can stay there, sorry, page 2. This is the audit report from our auditors. It is an unqualified or clean audit opinion. I won't steal any more of their thunder by speaking about it, but we'd like to see a good, clean audit opinion, so that's good for us. The next item I'd like to draw to your attention is the statement of operations. which is commonly called the income statement. And if you go down, and sorry, I've got different pages in front of me, so if you just go down a couple more pages for me, one more. There we go. So this is the statement of operations. We're skipping over the balance sheet, primarily because there's nothing of significant interest to draw to your attention. It's the income statement I wanted to focus on for a couple of items for you tonight. The first section of the income statement refers to or lists all the various sources of revenue. And you'll notice that overall, the library's revenue is relatively consistent compared to both budget and compared to last year. Obviously, there are a number of fluctuations based on the pandemic, but your two largest sources of funding, both the town's grant and the provincial grant, those remained relatively unchanged based off of the budget. And so that's a good thing. That means the revenues were stable. And so not much more to draw to your attention there. It's the expenses where we see a lot of change, specifically in the personnel line. The change in the personnel line for this past year was about $905,000 different. And obviously, as I don't have to tell you as a board, the pandemic has had significant impact on the operations and the services that the library offers to residents, and that has also had an impact on the number of staff that we have, and this can be clearly seen in this line here on your financial statements. In fact, if your eyes turn to the third last line of that statement, you'll see that your annual surplus is $916,000. Compared to budget, about $905,000 of that is due to personnel. That was by far your biggest driver of any changes this year. That's all I'd like to say about the income statement. There are a couple of items that I would want to draw to your attention regarding the notes. The first one is about employee future benefits or post-employment benefits, and this one's for you, Pankaj. We did have to work with our actuaries this year. We work with our actuaries every year. And before I keep talking, maybe we can turn to page 8 on the financial statements themselves. So there we go. So this is the post-employment benefit liability, which captures the value of the post-employment services and benefits that the library offers to a number of their staff members. And so every year we work with an actuarial firm to determine what that present value is. And one of the variables that goes into that is determining what the discount rate is to calculate the fair value of these items. And this year we had a decrease in that rate due to the change in interest rates. And as a result, that actually drives our liability up a little bit more, or I should say our obligation up a little bit more. And if we go to the next page, you can see that our balance at the end of the year is now $529,000 of our obligation, some of which is driven by a change in that discount rate. So the regular activity in there, or the rest of the activity in there was pretty regular, but that was a conversation that we did take with our actuarial firm this year to ensure that that is a reasonable number. The other item that I'd like to draw to your attention is if we turn to page, actually the next page, and at the very bottom, you'll see the accumulated surplus note. And this is a note I reference every year when I have the opportunity to chat with you. There's two tables on this one. The first one summarizes what the accumulated surplus for the library is and what it's made up of. A lot of that is invested in your capital assets, which is your collections. But if we turn to the next page, this is the key item I always like to touch on. This little chart here that starts with annual surplus, this helps to reconcile the difference between your annual surplus in these audited statements versus the operating surplus that Belinda and the finance team report to you, I think, on a quarterly basis. And there are some differences. The operating budget or the operating results are prepared in line with the way the budget is prepared, whereas these statements here, the audited ones, are prepared in accordance with public sector accounting standards. And there are some differences between the two, and this note kind of highlights what some of those key differences are and helps to reconcile them. So if you ever get a different number from Belinda or Dalabar or Catherine, this is how you can help figure out what the difference is and what it relates to. And the biggest item for you to be aware of is the impact of your capital items. You'll notice that the very last line, I shouldn't say the very last line, but the last one of activity is called tangible capital asset acquisitions. And this is the purchase of your collections. This is your books that you're buying. Those are included in the operating budget, but for these audited statements, those are capitalized, and then we amortize them, which is actually the first line under the add section where we amortize them. And those are the two biggest drivers in the change, just in terms of how they're accounted for. It's very normal, it's very typical of, it's the same at the town and it's the same at any other library. But I always like to point it out because there are some differences between what you see on the operating books versus the audited books. That's the only things that I'd like to bring to your attention. So before I turn it over to KPMG and before I introduce them, I just wanted to pause and see if you had any questions for me related to the financial statements or anything else that I can help with on that front.
Members of the board, any questions for Jonathan? I'm not seeing any. Jonathan, go ahead.
All right, so then we can turn it over to KPMG. We're joined tonight by Carlos Alvarez, who is our audit partner, and he's new to the town of Oakville this year. A familiar face to me, actually. I've known him for many years, and we're happy to have him as our auditor. And he's joined by Matt Chiridelli, who's the audit manager, and he's been working with the town and the library for at least 3 years now, so he's also well known to us. So I'll turn it over to them and to their presentation.
Thank you. Welcome.
Okay, thanks very much. Sorry, I just had to take myself off of mute. So understanding that the audit findings report would have been pre-circulated, Matt and I will focus in on the items that are most significant and material. As Jonathan started to speak to in terms of the audit report, happy to report that the audit report is clean, which is always a goal that we strive towards. And where we would like to begin in this specific report is on the executive summary, which I believe is page 3. Essentially, we are complete. Sorry, if you go one more slide. Essentially, we are complete in terms of the audit process. You know, by all means, do ask questions as we go through the report. In terms of what's new for 2020, you know, certainly the 2 items are the impacts of COVID-19, and then what makes accountants and auditors very excited is the new auditing standard, which we were required to implement in 2020 relating to auditing standards. And in terms of COVID-19, I think it was already explained in terms of the decrease in expenses on a year-over-year basis. But from an audit perspective, the way we look at COVID-19 is we start by looking at the internal control process and whether or not the COVID-19 has had an impact in terms of changes to any of the internal controls at the library. So that is the first consideration that we look at. And the second would be, because of COVID-19, are there any impairments of any of your financial assets as a result? So Matt and I, you know, went through the process of assessing the impact of COVID-19, including documenting all of our considerations. And other than the fluctuations, which have already been explained, there are really no other items to note as it specifically pertains to COVID-19. And in terms of the adoption of that new auditing standard on estimates, and when we speak of estimates, you know, do keep in mind that, you know, we're talking about useful life of tangible capital assets, allowance for doubtful accounts, employee future benefit liabilities. Those are the types of estimates that we're making reference to. So we effectively, you know, completed that process. Essentially, there were no changes to any of the assumptions or the estimates that were used to generate your financial statements. In terms of finalizing the audit, all of the items that are listed are very customary to where we expect to be at this point in time. What would be an audit without discussing misstatements in terms of corrected and uncorrected differences? Kudos to management. It is a clean sheet. And so there were no, you know, corrected differences as a result of the audit. And that, you know, gives a good indication in terms of the books and records being well prepared and ready for audit when they were provided to us. From a control deficiency standpoint, happy to report there were no significant deficiencies in internal control that we detected as part of our audit process. Moving along to the next slide. This provides some additional verbiage in terms of, you know, the impact of COVID-19. You know, I would say there would be no other additional comments on this slide. So we can move along to slide number 5. Certainly, from a execution standpoint, all of the audit was done remotely, using virtual tools, whether it be Zoom or Teams. But essentially, we were able to obtain all of the audit documentation that we required, just as if we were conducting the audit physically at the town. So again, there were no hiccups along the way, no overages of any sort as it relates to the audit process. Moving along to the next slide. Again, this just provides some additional detail on the new estimate standard, but nothing else came out of that process. On page 7, just as a reminder, in Canada, there are 2 risks around fraud that we are always required to consider. One is the fraud risk associated with revenue recognition, and the second is the fraud risk associated with management override. Based on all of the procedures that we performed as part of the audit, happy to report that there was no actual fraud or suspected fraud. Everything was above board in terms of our audit testing and our results. Moving along to the next slide. And I'll let Matt speak to the next few slides before we get into some of the other parts of the report.
Yeah, thanks very much, Carlos. So I will take over for the next few here. The meat and potatoes of the audit, I like to call these slides. So Carlos did mention that there are 2 presumed fraud risks that we have to address or at least consider in all of our audits in Canada. So the first one, management override of controls, is non-rebuttable. So we do have procedures to address that in every audit we issue in Canada. And Carlos mentioned that nothing to bring to your attention there. The second is over revenue recognition. And based on the nature of the library's revenue streams, we do rebut the presumed fraud risk over revenue recognition because it is very straightforward for us as auditors to obtain third-party evidence and validate all of the revenue that shows on your financial statements. Now, that said, just because we rebut that presumed fraud risk does not mean we do not audit revenue on a substantive basis. So that's what this slide refers to here. Obviously, the majority of the revenue comes from the operating grant from the town, but we do go to third-party confirmations or grant agreements for those which are third-party in nature. Happy to report that we did not identify any issues with regards to the recognition, the timing of revenue recognition, or the presentation. So any amounts which did have to be considered for deferral, recognition in future periods alongside expenses that those revenues are intended to support was clean, no adjustments there. And also worth mention, though we do not take a controls-based approach to auditing revenue, we do observe the control process and some of management's back-end processes surrounding revenue and deferred revenue. And we did note that there was some improvement over the past, which had been discussed in last year's report. So again, kudos to management for acting on their plan and following through with some of those process improvements. Thank you. So talking about employee future benefits on this slide, and I'm glad that John referred to the note in the financial statements on this one earlier, because it does segue into our slide here. This is something that we see in our audits each year, and is one of the areas that we did consider under the new auditing standard over estimates that Carlos referred to. This is probably the biggest area in your financial statements that would be considered an estimate. And of course, because there is a present value calculation here that the actuary helps management with on an annual basis, there is some estimation uncertainty in any valuation of future employee benefit liabilities. So we did have some additional documentation requirements for our audit file in order to comply with that new accounting standard. Without going into too much jargon and detail, I will say that our actual audit procedures over this estimate did not change. We have always taken a very deep dive into this area of the financial statements. We did, however, have to go through a few more hurdles and a higher bar in terms of documenting our understanding of the process, management's work with the actuary, and some of the actuary's assumptions that lead to the number you see on your financial statement. And as John mentioned, the biggest one there is the discount rate. Obviously has the biggest ability to impact the number that you report. We do our benchmarking across industry comparables, third-party sources, and we're comfortable with the number that the actuary used is reasonable. And to bring the discussion on this one to a close, really we don't consider management to have much impact or ability to affect this estimate because the third-party actuary provides the report that forms the foundation for this number. So there's not a lot of intervention on management's part. And for that reason, not a huge impact other than the documentation requirements I mentioned for the new auditing standard. And on this slide here, just drawing to your attention that there have been no significant changes to your financial statements. They do disclose everything that's required in the applicable framework, and no big changes to your notes either. So if you had last year's statements, you would notice they're very consistent in terms of layout. Other matters, so page 11 here, we did have one observation that we did bring to the attention of management, and this was below our posting threshold, so it is not considered an audit difference, although something we did include just in the spirit of continuous improvement. We did see one capital asset addition, so collections that was purchased in late 2019 that were recorded in 2020. So a very trivial amount. It was a single transaction of about $3,000, but we did just notify management as an observation. No change at the end of 2020. Your financial statements are in the same position they would have been regardless of how this transaction was accounted for. But again, just putting it in our presentation here in the spirit of improvement. And that segues into this slide. Just to say again, as Carlos mentioned, no corrected or uncorrected audit differences, and our threshold for reporting those amounts to you was just about $16,000. So I think that brings us to the end here. We do have a couple of standard appendices here. I do want to go to Appendix I briefly before we open it up to questions. Something we do point out at this point in all of our audits is that we are independent. No services being offered to the library board or the town, which would infringe on our independence as auditors, something that we always want to reaffirm as we do during the planning stage as well. And I'll turn it back over to Carlos here for some closing comments, and then we'll just open it up to questions if there are any.
Yeah, and just on that same slide, you'll see the note or reference to the management representation letter, which is a document that we ask management to sign. That is a really important document because these financial statements are your financial statements, and that document outlines management's responsibility. And so certainly we will ask management to sign that letter before we can issue our audit report. So that would conclude the formal topics. Maybe I will just pause there and open it up to questions.
Okay, members of the board, do you have any questions for our audit team? I do not see any. I have a general. I'm sorry, Pankaj?
One question, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Did management have a plausible explanation for that one transaction, even though it was insignificant, to have come in so late?
I think it was just timing of the receipt of some of those invoices. Management actually gets a little bit ahead and gathers all of the outstanding invoices earlier than they're sent, sometimes by the vendors, and I think that was the case here. So not really a gap in the process, maybe just something that you wish the vendor on the other side was a little more proactive about. And again, we do consider that trivial, just wanted to bring it to attention, just in the spirit of improvement again.
Is that, that's all, Pankaj?
That's it. I just wanted to congratulate the team for a clean audit as well. Way to go.
Thank you. I have a question. It's probably more of a general question in terms of the audit world in a pandemic environment. Are there any special considerations given to the volume of homework that's being done? I mean, it probably doesn't apply as much to the library, but how do you reconcile the fact that so much is being done outside of traditional supervision, and whether that has an impact on your work?
Well, I think what you're getting to is the control environment.
Yeah.
I mean, our expectation is that, you know, whether it be, you know, approval of payroll, approval of, you know, accounts payable, you know, signing of checks before they go out, our expectation is that the control framework may look a little bit different, but essentially you should have the same controls in place, you know, the same fundamental controls, whether you're, you know, working virtually or not. Many organizations, you know, have been able to make the pivot, you know, from being, you know, say mostly paper-based to being more sort of digital and operating virtually rather seamlessly. But there's probably, you know, 10% of our clients who have really struggled with that. I would say that, you know, in our experience based on this specific audit, you know, there was nothing that came to our attention that we would bring forward. You know, I think most of our clients, they've really accelerated their development in being more virtual and more digital. You know, in some cases, our clients have sort of leaped 5 years in the past 12 months. You know, I would just, you know, in terms of providing insight, you know, I would keep the learnings from this process, you know, and keep on moving forward in terms of becoming more digital and more virtually, because I think there's a lot of efficiencies that can be gained from that process. And once, you know, eventually when we come out of COVID and come out of the pandemic, you know, let's not take a step back and go to, you know, sort of the paper-based forms of the past, because I do feel that that would be inefficient.
I agree with you. I'm just, will the firm be providing any kind of guidance on that at any point in the future, or, I mean, general guidance in terms of new practices or protocols to embrace what we've learned? And I assume where we're going in the future with probably more homework being done across the board. Is there a necessity for, or are there any valuable insights that the audit firm can provide to us as a client in terms of establishing or changing any practices that might make it more efficient?
Yeah, what we have developed, which we will be rolling out, is almost like an IT and digital readiness process in which, you know, once you come out of COVID, you know, you can take stock of, you know, where you were 12 months ago, where you are, you know, when you come out of COVID, and how does the future look sort of 2 and 3 years down the road. And we can provide, you know, very high level guidance so that the management team can drive the bus in terms of just keeping on that path to being more digital and virtually, you know, and hopefully having a stronger control environment. So we have those tools in place, and, you know, certainly we will, you know, offer those tools to you. They aren't really that expensive, to be honest, because these are more about helping you assess where you are and allowing you to do a lot of the work yourself in terms of implementation.
Thank you. I've become very keen on trying to make what's my long departed mother's favorite expression, a silk purse out of a sow's ear out of this pandemic experience, and try to learn as much as we can and take advantage of some of the positive aspects, and a lot of those include how we work, I think. So I would be certainly interested in seeing that, if that's something that our management team chooses to purchase from you or avail yourself of from you in the future. So thank you very much for that. I'll just go back to the board for a second. Are there any further questions or comments? Okay, members of the board, we have 6.1 and 6.2 to dispose of now. 6.1 is the approval of financial statements, and 6.2 is approval of the audit. Can I get a motion? Let's start with 6.1, please. Somebody like Pankage, thank you, and Bill. Comments, questions? Any objections to the approval? Okay, 6.1, the audit, the financial statements are approved. 6.2, I need a mover for the approval of the audit. Pankage again, and Susan, thank you. Any comments or questions? Any objections to the approval? Seeing none, that is approved. Thank you to our friends at KPMG, and thank you, Jonathan, and everybody involved. Management team, congratulations on another clean audit, and well done, everybody. Let's move on to good evening. Let's move on to 6.3.
Thank you very much.
Safety and well-being of children policy. This is, I guess, referred from our last meeting. Hello,
Good evening,
Simona,
everyone. Good evening. So the report outlines the changes that you have asked at the last meeting and outlines the reasons the changes have been made. I primarily want to draw your attention to the fact that the title of the policy has been changed to include the word well-being and to remove the word library in library to be more inclusive of other spaces where the policy applies. We discussed the fact that it would apply in a virtual program as well. And the word well-being shows up in the actual policy in a number of places as well. In addition to that, we have made the changes that we discussed during the last meeting in regards to wording in several places. We also separated the way the policy would apply in a virtual environment versus an in-person environment into two separate headings. And the other update that we have made is right at the end, we try to define visible supervision, which is something that we have discussed. So try to define that a bit better and updated the related documents to just make sure that we have the correct language. So those are the changes, and we're basically bringing it for approval at this time, asking if the changes that we have made are what you were looking for or if you require anything else.
Thanks, Simona. Members of the board, any comments or questions? Andrew, how are you feeling about this? I know you had raised some concerns last time. Are you satisfied with the changes?
Yeah, I thank you very much for incorporating those changes, Simona, and also I greatly appreciate the clearly identified changes that were made. It was very easy to read and see, so well done. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Bill, I saw your hand.
I just had one question.
Sure.
We probably talked about this and I forgot already, but the virtual and the children under the age of 13 must obtain adult permission. I was just wondering, how do you get that adult permission? What is that?
So we don't ask for anything in writing, if that's what you're asking. Generally, a parent would register the child anyways. What we discussed last time is that supervision might not necessarily be the right word, because supervision implies that the parent is right next to the child. And so perhaps using a word like permission would imply that the parent has given permission, has signed up the child for the program, is probably maybe in another room similar to virtual schooling these days, but is not necessarily right next to the child. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the word permission is implied in the way the child would be registered for the program.
Okay. That's, I mean, I realize, getting real, written permission would be very difficult to get, but I just wondered, so.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me know.
Thanks, Bill. Anything further on this policy? Okay, I'll look for a motion on this. This is the approval of the safety and well-being of children policy. Can somebody give me that motion, please? Moved by Bill and seconded by Andrew. Thank you. Further comments or questions before I call the vote? Seeing no comments or questions or indications thereof, I am asking if anybody has an objection to the approval of this policy. I see no objections, so that is approved. We're moving on to 6.4, that's the Customer Code of Conduct Policy. And, oh, look, it's Simona again.
So we have also discussed this one at the last meeting. You provided some feedback, not so much on the changes to the actual policy, but we discussed the fact that it would probably be a good idea that we ask the Corporate Inclusion Advisory Group at the town to review it and provide feedback. We do have a staff member, a supervisor at one of our branches who actually sits on that committee to represent the library. So she took that back to the committee, asked for feedback. We did not receive any significant changes. The only changes that we have received as a result of that, we received clarification that the fact that we originally, you might recall in the original policy that we brought to you last time, the respectful conduct policy that the town has was referred to. And so the feedback that we got from them is that it's probably good to just leave it in there and not remove it. So we put that back in the sense that this policy applies in conjunction with a number of other town policies, including the respectful conduct policy. And the other two suggestions that we received from them was in terms of inappropriate behavior, one of the phrases that they also use is they refer to offensive gestures in addition to verbal or physical assault, and so we included that language in there. And the other thing that they also suggested, what it's probably a good idea when you're saying follow all library policies, to kind of say, and where are you going to find them? Because, they're not all found everywhere. It's not like every single policy is printed somewhere and posted online. I mean, obviously, they're all online, but they're not all necessarily printed anywhere. We use the word as posted in print and or online to kind of cover everything. And then the last change I have made is in the references section right at the end. Because we changed the name of the safety of children, I changed that to be the safety and well-being of children policy. So those are the changes as a follow-up to last meeting, and we're bringing it forward to you for approval this time.
Thanks, Simona. Members of the board, comments or questions? I see none. Can somebody provide me with a motion to approve this, please? Andrew and Janet, thank you very much. Last chance for comments or questions? Janet, you kept your hand up a little longer than normal. Did you have a question or comment? No? Okay. Are there any objections to the approval of this policy? Seeing none, that is approved. Thank you very much. Recruitment policy is up next.
Hello. So what we have before you for the first time is the recruitment policy, which is coming to the board for information and comment. The previous recruitment policy had last been approved in 2013, and as you could see, was quite out of date. So we made some improvements to it. We made it in line with the current policies, as well as the inclusion policy, making it clear that we are looking to be an inclusive workforce and hire diverse staffing, as well as just outlining the different responsibilities of both us and employees and potential employees, and kind of highlighting the process that we go through for recruitment. So happy to take questions and comments.
Members of the board, comments or questions on this policy? What an agreeable bunch tonight. Oh, Janet, go ahead.
Thank you for bringing the policy forward. Consistent with what we asked last time, has this policy been reviewed by the Inclusion Committee? I don't know if that's the official title at the town, but asked them for their perspective on it?
This one has not gone to them, no.
Okay. I'd like to encourage that because I think there's, at the heart of building a diverse and inclusive workforce, recruitment really is at the heart of it. And I'm not, advocating any specific changes, but I would like them to take a look at it. One of the elements that did jump out at me, and I've always been a big supporter of internal development, but that really does require that your entry level or certain level positions need to be quite diverse if you want to get to leadership roles that have the level of diversity that you're looking for. So I just think it would be healthy to have them take a look and see if they have any comments or suggestions.
No, absolutely. I can bring it to them. I've also brought up to the town because they were really good with reviewing. It's not their purpose as a group. So, but we have actually mentioned to the town that as part of how the diversity inclusion group expands, it might not be a bad idea to form a group just to look at policies to do that. So we can have them take a peek.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janet. Anything further on this one? Okay, so the action on this particular item is to receive for information. So would somebody like to give me that motion with the understanding of the staff direction that was just given by Janet? Anybody? Thank you. Susan, Bill. Last call for comments or questions? Any objections to the approval or to the receipt, I should say? Seeing none, that is received. Thank you. Rates and fees policy. This is policy night in Oakville.
We're trying to get through as many of them as possible, as you can tell.
Absolutely.
All right, so this is a new policy. It's not really new, it's replacing a policy that we have, but because we have changed it considerably, we did not do track changes in this case. I think we discussed this before, that when we're sort of rewriting something from scratch, it doesn't make any sense to try and do that. So the current policy, it's called Fees for Service, and it's Appendix B in the report. And it was last reviewed in 2013. So the one we're bringing forward to you has some changes, and we also changed the name to be called the Rates and Fees Policy, which is in line with the way we refer to the chart that outlines the rates and fees. The other thing that is changed in this one, clearly we offer some different services from what we used to offer back in 2013. And while the list is not meant to be an exhaustive list of all of the things that we can possibly charge for, it's supposed to provide some kind of a list of some of the things that we charge for. And so we have updated the list that was included in the old policy to have things such as the membership fee that we can now charge for, the non-resident membership fee, the creation zone, all of the creation zone and the 3D printing services that we clearly did not have back then, and to just make sure that, it is a bit more up to date in terms of what we do. But again, it doesn't mean that we cannot add other fees in the future. And the other thing that is different in this one is we are also trying, without actually putting links because those do change, to make it clear where those fees can be found, where the most up-to-date fees can be found, and what is the approval process. So, obviously, as you know, we approve, they get approved. You approve them once a year during the approval process, during the annual operating budget planning process. And the previous policy did not speak to how those were approved and where they were posted. So these are the significant changes to the original policy. So we're bringing it forward to you this evening for comment, so that we can, then make the changes and hopefully get it approved next time.
Thank you. Members of the board, comments or questions? I do. A couple of them. First of all, late return of materials borrowed, materials damaged or lost. Now, I know that we, in some rare circumstances now, we charge for those things, but late return of materials borrowed, I thought we had waived those fees.
Right. So what we do, you're absolutely right. At the moment, we do not charge for anything at all that is returned late.
Right.
However, one of the things that we still left in the rates and fees that was approved last fall as part of the budget, we already knew at that time that there would be no late fees. We left in there the fees for the Fastlane materials, thank you. I kept thinking of another name for them because everybody calls them differently. And there is a reason for that. We do not charge at the moment for Fastlanes. Well, we don't circulate any at the moment, clearly. But we don't charge any. We did leave that option in there. And that primarily has something to do with the way those materials are purchased from a specific budget that was, I believe, some kind of a, it's an endowment fund. So we have not been able to figure out a way to go around that at the moment, and there was no pressure to do anything about it. But, you know, to remove the ability to charge that and then go put it back, it's more complicated. So we left it in there. It's in the rates and fees chart that you approved back in the fall. We're not actually charging anything at the moment, but we are thinking about ways of how we're going to deal with it. There are other libraries that do lend out materials like this, and they still don't charge anything, but we really didn't need to do much about it. So we will deal with it before the next budget. Yeah.
So I do recall we had the conversation about Fastlane, and that made perfect sense at the time. But I just wonder if it's a policy statement, this is the sort of the overarching statement about this particular area, should we not better define what our policy is around fees in this document? So maybe an additional paragraph that actually talks about the board-approved policy now that that's on the books.
Yes.
Just to flesh it out more. So if somebody reads this the first time, they don't, like my initial instinct when I read this the other day was, hold on a second.
Yes.
We changed that, and rather than just leaving it like that to, you know, so it doesn't leave the question or leave some ambiguity, can we not have some clear definition of that?
Sure. Tara and I discussed this briefly about the fact that, in fact, some of the libraries that have recently done the same thing we did that. And when I was reviewing all the policies, I noticed that. You know, and my first thought was, yes, let's put that in there. However, the way I read it, and perhaps I misunderstood that. I know we had a conversation. The way I read it is that in the August 2020 board minutes, I checked that a couple of times. It appeared, if I understood that correctly, that approval of not charging overdue fees was the commitment, 100%, was that will happen up until the end of 2021. And so I guess that is the unclear. So that is why I didn't put it in. But maybe we can all clarify, and I would be happy to do that.
I believe that was
later on, not in August. So the decision would have been made a bit later.
So I think that it was brought to.
In August.
Yeah, the original conversation was to waive them during, and then we said, let's take the step and make it permanent.
Okay.
So I believe, I mean, go back and check the record. I am virtually positive we made this permanent, and I believe there's a press release that talks about that as well.
Yeah. So it would have probably been in either September or October in that case.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is, absolutely, I can do that. Okay. Like I said, when I was reviewing this, I thought at first, maybe I should put it in there for that very reason. And then I went and started checking everything to make sure. And then I kind of felt uncomfortable putting it in because I wasn't, you know, it's not good to put in a policy something that could potentially change.
Yeah,
but absolutely, absolutely, that's not a problem, for sure.
So I would suggest an overarching statement about our fees, about our no late fees policy, and then, you know, you can put the caveat in there, late return materials, you know, for excluded materials or something like that, so that it's clear. My second comment is similar to membership fees. I'm uncomfortable with the term membership fees being in there without some sort of clarifier.
Which ones? Yes.
Yeah, so it should say, if it's non-resident membership fees, let's say non-resident membership fees.
Yep.
Because I mean, I think there's often this question about, well, maybe we could raise a lot of money by charging for library cards. I don't want anybody to ever get that impression of that.
No.
That's something that we're doing. So I would like to see that reflect the conditions upon which there is a membership
For
fee.
sure, yeah.
Okay. So those are my points, the only points. Are there any other comments or questions from members of the board? I don't see any. Would somebody like to give me a motion to receive this with the staff direction for those changes? Susan and Janet, thank you. Last chance for comments or questions. Any objection to the receipt? Seeing none, that's received. Thank you, Simona. Okay, 6.7, one of my favorite parts of every board meeting, the Halton Information Providers update. I said providers twice. It's so nice, I said it twice. And look who's here. It's Marcus. And now he's gone. He was in front of me just a moment ago, and he's disappeared.
Oh, I'm still here. I
Oh,
can
there
see
you
myself.
are. You're teeny tiny up in the top corner of my screen. Hello, Marcus. Tell us what's new.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to Audit and Policy Night. So it's exciting.
It's like Taco
so I'm
Tuesday,
here
it's Policy
once again
Thursday.
to provide you with a yearly update on Halton Information Providers, so the Halton Community Services Database, and Information Oakville. So in my report, I talked about a couple of things. One being that we are officially shifting our reporting, our stats to Google Analytics, which will give us a better picture of who's looking at our database, who's looking for what, and the numbers will be more realistic. And so there might be some changes in if you're keeping up to date with the years and years that I've presented, that some of the numbers might be a little bit lower, and it's only because we're getting better at eliminating the counts of the bots and the computers that get into our system. And so we were able to, with Google Analytics, better to eliminate that. So our stats are more realistic now. Also, I talked about it a little bit about this year and COVID and how community services information has been a highlight of the pandemic crisis, and getting real information to people on time and having it being updated constantly. And so that's the information and referral sector, which really is the Halton Community Services Database and our partnership in the Halton Information Providers. It's critical that this service is here and that we are recognized as a provider of information, real information. So really excited that there's some new opportunities coming down from our federal government, who is now funding and creating a national 211 system for Canada, which it has been very spotty. So we have Ontario, we have Nova Scotia, we have Alberta right now, or Manitoba is coming up. And so this is it's a signal to us here in Ontario, particularly me as the president of Inform Ontario, representing Oakville Public Library and HIP, that this is a signal boost to us that the work that we do is important and critical in times of crisis, no matter what the crisis is. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. So I always present like our top views for the whole database, and then Oakville, because we're so interested in Oakville. So you see that people are searching for the Ontario Premier very highly right now, and I think this really speaks to the way that Google looks at us and looks at our stats, looks at our information, because we change it and we touch it and we update it and curate it so much that Google sees us as an option, right? So when you Google search, we're in the top results. So this it's a bit skewed because the 12,000 hits or 12,000 views for the Ontario Premier actually don't all come from Halton. They come from across the province. But I think it speaks to how Google sees us. And so anybody in the province searching the Ontario Premier are getting our record, and they're seeing our information. And then below that, really, there's nothing a whole lot of different change or a lot of change. Medical clinics and walk-ins, attorney generals, Milton Family Court, drive test, Oakville, emergency shelters, correctional, health department. Those are all very, very consistent, highly viewed records that we have in our directory. So you can see on the right-hand side, just a little bit of a comparison from 2018 to 2020. Again, that 2020 a little bit lower because we are using Google Analytics and getting better at eliminating sort of those false views, if you will, from bot computers. Next slide. So this is, we're able to isolate Oakville views, and we do this with all of our partners. So Milton, Burlington, Halton Hills, and Oakville get this breakdown on a monthly basis and on a yearly basis. So these are the top views in Oakville. Obviously, COVID records are high searches and high looked at on our directory. Consistent every year, the Salvation Army, the Kerr Street Ministry, the thrift stores, housing, the grocery and delivery, those types of things are very high on our in Oakville views. So that's what people are looking for in Oakville on our directory throughout the year. Again, 2018 to 2020, a little bit of a wonky kind of stat there, but pretty close. Again, really trying to isolate those bots. So we are working really hard at really trying to increase our visibility, increase our outreach and our training of the directory in the community right now. It's a really great time to be showing an online resource because we're all on Zoom. And so and I'll talk about this a little bit when I talk about the expert newcomer feedback sessions that we've been holding. But it is, we really are looking at getting into those diverse communities. And so my staff, particularly Andrew, is really working hard at getting our name out there and getting some training and outreach done. So we've been doing lots of training with the Burlington Health teams, with the HMC different groups. And Andrew is tomorrow talking with OneLink here to talk about how do we get physicians to look at using the database to do some social prescribing as opposed to the medical prescribing when they're working with patients. So mental health resources, those types of things, as opposed to just the medical prescription. Next slide. So of course, last year, or 6 months ago, I presented the COVID-19. We have a special listing and alert on our directory. Next slide, please. That's been up for a year and a bit now. And so this is updated daily. My database coordinator, Mark, is constantly watching the region and watching the province and getting Tara's updates. And we'll update this alert, which appears at the beginning of, or at the main page of our directory every day, every time you see it. So it's updated constantly. And next slide, please. So back in October, I presented March to September records, and now I can give you from March to March. So the year-to-date column to 2021 is March 31st, December 31st. No, sorry, we did the whole year, so it's It's actually March to March for these records and for the COVID records. So you can see the difference and how much I kept them in the same order, but you can see. As the virus progressed and as the testing progressed and as the need for emergency food and those types of things progressed this year, people were really looking at the directory to find out what and where to get information and how to do things during COVID. We added 3 since October. Since I presented, we added 3 new alerts, packages there. So the last 3 on the bottom of the screen, the assessment centers and testing sites, the vaccine information, and then transportation to vaccine sites, we very recently added to March 31st. So those numbers are a little bit low, but they will increase. So in 6 months, we went from 23,000 looks to 51,000, which we're quite pleased with. Next slide. And I think I might have mentioned this the last time I was here, but the ARKITS network did a shift in their strategic plan and had decided to remove pieces of their programming or pieces of what they're offering to the community. And one of those pieces was the Halton iParent directory, which was managed by MCRC and the THRC in Milton. And so we were approached to take that over. And so we were very happy to, and it's a great partnership, and it lends to like what we do. So we took over the 500 plus listings in the Halton iParent directory. Now lives in Halton Parenting directory on our site, or on our Halton Community Services directory. We launched it on February the 11th, I believe it was, and we did two sort of community launches where I really wanted to let the community know, and the people that were the service providers and the parents that were using the directory, to know where all that information was going. And so we had two different community events online, of course. One, we had 85 attendants from the community and from parents and from service users and service providers. And then an hour later, we had sort of a higher level Halton Regional Children's Services staff, regional counselors, Oakville counselors. Thank you to Councillor Haslett for being in attendance. And so we had 85 and then 27 attendees. So it was well received. And from the day that we launched it on February 11th to March 31st, we've had close to over 4,500 views on the directory. So it's well used. And I'm really, I got a shout out to Mark, my staff, Mark, the directory coordinator, and MCRC, THRC's data editor, Phoebe Mohammed, who really took the lion's share of transporting all of the records and all the information into our directory. So if you go out our directory, you'll see we now have a youth view, seniors view, and now a parenting view. Next slide. The Halton Newcomer Info Pods. I had reported on this grant that we achieved, and then COVID happened. I can't wait to not have to say that. But COVID did happen, and it put us behind. We're about 3 or 4 months behind now. I would say 4 or 5 months behind in the execution of and development of the Newcomer Info Pods. So if you remember, it's a 5-year grant. It was approximately $1.2 million grant that we received or got approved for. And then COVID happened. And because we're a new program for Immigration Refugee Citizenship Canada, they decided that they would approve 2 years and then review and then look at the next 3 years if they wanted to continue to support the program. So I have some really great support from our grant person at IRCC who, deals with us and probably about 10,000 other organizations. So they're very, very aware of the delays that COVID has hit. And so we're working through that. But we have been able to shift going online to do, one of the outcomes was because I don't believe in creating a product without having community feedback. And so the grant had 6 different newcomer consultations embedded in it that were supposed to be face-to-face with snacks and prizes and things like that to entice people to participate. We had to shift that online, which turned out to be a really amazing thing because all of the partners such as HMC, the Welcome Center, Achieve, the Halton Equity and Diversity Roundtable really stepped up and invited us into specific groups and different groups. So we've had 13 different consultations now from our newcomer experts who are giving us feedback on the directory and how they would use it and what they would be searching for. And so we've really been able to capture a very diverse, if you will, diverse and wide-spanning kind of feedback from youth and from people just starting to learn English, and physicians and agency staff in settlement agencies have been amazing in giving us feedback too, and how we should be creating this new navigation tool for our newcomers to find supports in their community. Andrew, once again, is also presenting, or he did present to the Center for Skills and Development on the Newcomer Day, which we usually attend in person, and we have the database there, we have computers, and we have newcomers using it and getting real-time feedback. This time it was online, and we are on track. I met with IRCC today to talk about our year-end financials and the progress of the grant, and then we met with our developer, we're using the COP platform, the same platform that we're on in the directory, to develop the program. And so we have my team and I met with Kate this afternoon, and we have a plan. We have a lot of information. You can't create things without the content. And so we have a lot of work to do, but our plan is that we want to launch in September of this year to fully execute this new navigation tool. So it really will be, if you remember, it will be information pod. So it is an actual unit that will be in our libraries. It will be in our newcomer centers that will help newcomers with their settlement workers or by themselves to socially navigate different programs and services in the Halton region in a much easier and more safe and private way. Sorry, I'm going to talk about it because I'm so excited about the project, but some of the feedback that I'm getting from our newcomer population is they will use it because there are a lot of social aspects about their lives that they won't or don't feel comfortable talking to their settlement worker about. So they can use this tool at home, because it's going to be online as well, or use it privately to look up things about divorce or domestic abuse, and so some of those things that they won't talk to their settlement workers about. So that feedback really inspired me throughout the last couple of months to really get this done, and really excited about that we can offer this product or this thing to our newcomers here. So it does seem like we've been talking about it a long time, we have, but it's a big project, and I'm excited about it. My team's excited, and we're moving forward. So next slide, please. So obviously during COVID, we are trying our best and trying different ways to attract followers and attract people to the directory to get the information. So we are on social media. We have been on Twitter since 2014. Very, when I first started, we just started one. It was very new to everybody. Again, Andrew, my staff has really picked up on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. We just launched in December. And so here's some stats on some of our reach through Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And then the next couple of slides, I'm just going to show you a little bit about how we're promoting online the directory. So what Andrew has done is he's created a media kit for all of our partners, and they all have access to these graphics where they can, if they're doing their social media in their own library, they can help us promote this, and they have access to this. So kudos to Andrew for getting this done for us. So these are just some of the examples that that we've pulled together that are tweetable, Facebookable, and Instagrammable, if those are words. So we're really trying to get the word out there about the HIP directory. Next slide. So of course we want to do our own, pumping our own directories out there. So we have some for our Halton Seniors directory and then some for our youth directory, trying to make them relevant and engaging, and trying to get our partners in the HIP partnership to really help us promote that. Right? And so because we are in touch with the community and our resources, Andrew has really again stepped up to take a look at what the community is asking for. And so he's come up with these sort of posters and social media graphics that people can use, very targeted to seniors and crisis lines and youth. And so when we're talking about COVID and mental health, we'll send out a mental health poster. We'll send out a crisis line poster that's constantly being fed into the community who are following us and we're following them and we're seeing people retweeting and really engaging in these graphics. Of course, anytime we're presenting or in a group, like a youth group of agencies, we will present these and offer these graphics to folks as well. So there is a really, that's HIP in a nutshell, and you understand that we also wear the Information Oakville hat. So next slide, please. So Information Oakville is the service that most libraries in Oakville offer to the community to help promote new programs and services and events and that type of thing. So it's brochures from the region, it's brochures from different community groups, so that people can come into the library and get the information. So obviously that's not happening during COVID, and so we had to again shift how that service in the our public library looks. And so of course we went online, and so we are on Facebook, I believe. No, we're on Instagram with Information Oakville, so that we can take, next slide please. So we can help promote different activities, different programs and services that our partners and our community are offering out into the community with our residents. So we this is a hard word for me, retweet. We retweet things from our partners and our Oakville partners, and we also can create different sort of specialized posters. We really try to link it back to the directory. So if you're in our directory, we can help you promote it, and we want it helping us drive people back into our community services directory. Next slide. So this is our Oakville Information Oakville Instagram. Started April 2020. We have 505 followers. Andrew is really, I'm saying Andrew's name a lot because he does a lot of work on this, and social media is a really great way to connect right now. So next slide. So these are some of the other ways that and other partnerships that we've grown through with COVID happening, even though COVID is happening. So the United Way of Halton Hamilton had a program where they were offering masks into the community. So in January, I said, sure, let's pick some masks up. So I picked up 10 boxes, which equated about 100 masks, and that were given into the community at Central Library. And so these are not our staff PPE masks. These are just boxes of masks that community can pick up at the library because we have them on display. So they did a second round just recently, and so we've expanded that now. I picked up a double order, and so now each branch masks that community can pick up when they're in the library getting their takeout. Next slide. I'm sure you've heard a lot about our community food corner. It's really well received, really well used, which I'm really pleased about. So we've been doing this for a number of years, and we just keep growing it because the community need is there. So really happy to, you'll see the picture on the right, on the left-hand side is currently the 10 shelves that we're using. When I first started it, we were using one shelf. We're now using 10 shelves, and it gets filled when we're open. It gets filled twice a day, 7 days a week when we're fully operational. And it's a partnership with Food for Life, so we get a twice-a-week delivery. So Central's been running for a number of years now, and thanks to, as we know, I think Tara brought this up, and Councillor Haslett brought this up last week or last meeting too. Now we had a community member, Katie Miller, who in the Clearview area wanted to start something, and so we talked with her and with Food for Life, and so now the picture on the right is the Clearview food shelf. So we start small and we grow and grow and grow. That community at Clearview has been amazing. They contribute to the food with us and Food for Life, and they promote it within their community, and really pleased to have that connection with that community member. Next slide, please. So we continue to grow, and during COVID, we got a fridge at Central, and so we are now fully operational with Food for Life, where we have a fridge when we're open. Folks can come to our Central branch and get fresh produce, bread, dairy, whatever Food for Life can give us, it's in our fridge. We also have a new partnership through Food for Life with the Halton Food for Thought Healthy Student Snack Bags. So they are bags of student snacks, healthy snacks. There's 5 of everything. So it takes you through your whole school week. And we also have on our food shelf through the Halton region some Healthy Smiles program. So we have toothbrushes and toothpaste that people can pick up as well. Next slide. Because we've been doing some really great promotion, and the food corner is really well known and really well promoted, we were contacted recently by the Oakville Milton Humane Society to ask us to help them promote and to help get some pet food out into the community for their program, Keeping Pets and People Together. So we also have pet food that we can offer to folks in the community. So that's going very well as well. People are using it, people are accessing it, and really appreciating the support that they can get. The picture on your left is a big thank you that we send out to Stephen Paquette, one of my dear friends and one of our Indigenous knowledge holders here, and his daughter, who heard about our community food pet corner and donated to it as well. So I just wanted to highlight that. Next slide. So accessibility during COVID, obviously, when we're in lockdown and shutdown, we wanted to make sure, how do we do this? How do we maintain the food accessibility and the food security for people in our community? So each branch looks a little bit different. The picture you have here is the Central branch. It's in our takeout area or grab and go area. That folks can come and get their books in their bags and take some food if they need it, and get their masks as well. We do have a lot of, we offer a call too, so if somebody needs pet food or somebody needs me to create a box or a bag of food, we do that as well. And so I currently have 5 customers that are accessing that call me each week and ask me to create a box for them, and so I'll make it and then it'll be there for them. We have people that are calling and asking for pet food, so we do that as well. Each branch is a bit different. At Glen Abbey just runs the fridge, and so all of that fresh and Food for Thought product is available to people. It's replaced twice a week, going really well. At Clearview, because of the limited space, we have signs and we are promoting that people can call the branch and ask for a box or a bag of food to be created, and we'll make that happen for them as well. Next slide. So the Halton Suicide Prevention Coalition has been a part of Oakville Public Library since I came here. It's one of the, I've been a member for 20 years, and the past chair of this coalition here in Halton, and Oakville Public Library is now represented very strongly on the coalition, and so we are really proud of the work that we're doing and the library's offering. So I just wanted to highlight some of the stuff or some of the actions that we're doing. So we have a new webcast. So we have 3 episodes that are available to the community. We are doing a lot of social media. So we do resources, then we do special engaging thoughts and encouraging thoughts out into the community on Facebook, and so that's going really well. People are responding to that, so it's just another way of, during COVID, to promote positive mental health and to promote suicide safety. So we have the coalition, if you don't know, is CMHA Halton and Hamilton, our school boards, ADAPT, our stress center. We have the region, of course, Oakville Public Library. We have a survivor, a really inspirational mother who recently lost her son to suicide, who is an amazing advocate and seems to have the Minister of Education on call and trying to embed some mental health, positive mental health in the school curriculums. So we've also just been notified last week that we are we've been accepted to the Mental Health Commission of Canada, the Roots of Hope early adopter program, which is a suicide safer community. And so it is an in-depth, I don't have all the information yet, it's an in-depth look at what your community is doing to promote safer suicide community. So there's 5 pillars, including communication, education, collaboration, that sort of thing. So we're well on our way to achieving that program through the Mental Health Commission. And I think it's perfect timing as we come out of COVID. We really need to respond to the mental health crisis that we're going to see and that we are seeing. So I'm really proud that Oakville Public Library is, a very leading some of that charge. And so that's exciting. Next slide. Super excited about this. This is, it just happened. This is an area that we now have developed, and it's in our food corner at Central on the 2nd floor on the Navy Street entrance. And I was just, I ran into Tara, because Tara is constantly, roaming the library, and she always seems to catch me while I'm doing things in the food shelf. And we just had a conversation one day about that space. And we've been having conversations about we need more art, we need to have some Indigenous art. How do we do this? And so I got a green light to engage the Indigenous community to create a mural in Central Library for us. So I was reached out into our community, and I was introduced to Joel Whiteduck, who is the leader of the Red Urban Nation Artist Collective in Toronto. But Joel is Mississauga of the Credit First Nation member, and has been doing some really amazing murals in the Toronto region. And so he and I had a chat, and we engaged him in creating something for Oakville Public Library. And so the story is it took several months for our relationship to build, as you do in Indigenous relationships in the community. Joel and his buddy, his co-artist Ren Longchild, visited us and spent a number of hours in Central Library, walking around. This was when we could still have people in the library, and visited the space, looked at the outside space, looked at the inside space, the flow, all of those things. We had ceremony together at 16 Mile Creek. He did some research and looked at the land and the water around Central Library, and this mural that I'm going to walk you through a little bit. So the mural, it's representative of the humans who gather to learn at the library through the medicine of trees, the original teachers, and the plants, who are the original teachers. So we were able to get Joel, Ren, and Angela to spend, it probably took them about a week and a half to create the mural. Like to actually paint it, but it was a lot of consultation, a lot of thought, and a lot of ceremony and understanding the land that Central Library sits on. So next slide, please. So this is just sort of the progression. The center wall is the wall in the center of the space. The next picture is our fellow artist Aiden Lee from the Autism Project, who has a permanent piece at our Iroquois Ridge branch called Storytime that he did for us, and I thought that would be interesting for them, for the artists, to both meet, and they had a really great conversation about trees and land, and so Ren was very appreciative of Aiden's contributions. So then you have the right wall, and I'm trying to, I wish you could all come and see it. I was trying to give you some perspective of as it progressed. So next slide. This is the final product. This is what it looks like now. So it is the mother bear, and there is, on our next slide, there is the story of the painting or the mural, which does represent humans, and so that's what you see. Thanks, Jess. That's what you see when you walk up the stairs from the second floor onto the Navy Street, onto the top floor. So on the right, on the left, and then the mural. And so I don't know if you can read that. It's a bit small on my screen, but it is called Mother Bear Medicine, and it's about Mother Bear being the teacher in her role, helping her little ones how to climb and learning. There's sacred teachings coming from the medicine of the tree, the birch tree, particularly in how Indigenous communities on Treaty 22, where we are in Oakville, learned and used for to survive and to live. The white bear, you can't really see him, but he's right there. The white bear, the spirit bear, is very sacred to the Anishinaabe, and it reminds us that we're all special and we all have lessons and we all have teachings to give in our circles. We're all unique. And then on the left-hand or the right-hand side with the water, all of the trees and all of the plants are indicative to the local land that Joel had researched and spent time with and consulted with grandmothers and the chief, Miss Sagas, and so all of it is very much representative of Oakville and 16 Mile Creek, which Central lives on. And that's really all I have for you tonight. I can't wait for you to, if you can come to the library when we're open again, to come into that space. When we were open, I would go up and just kind of watch people go into the space, because the kids love it because it's colorful and bright and vibrant, and the kids go in there and they play in there. I have one person that uses our food shelf, and we're developing a very close bond together and relationship as a community member, and I've seen her in there, and she'll stay for like 15, 20, 30 minutes, and she's just absorbing and looking, and she says it's really, she finds peace in that space. So we haven't actually launched it into the community. This is the first time that it's sort of been publicly shown, unless you've been in the library when you could come into the library. But I really like to do some sort of ceremony with bring back Joel, bring back the ED, Food for Life, and Tara, and just have some sort of, if we can, some sort of opening or celebration in June for Indigenous Heritage Month. But we have to wait to see what's happening in our world.
Okay.
So that's it, folks. Thank you.
The way you said that, it was like it wasn't a very substantive report, because it was quite a substantive report. So thank you for that. Questions or comments for Marcus? Janet.
Marcus, thanks very much. And I was so excited to see that Andrew is going to create some social media clips that we could maybe circulate to the counselors, because I don't think enough of town council knows about all of the great work. I mean, on a broad level they do, but when you have it in a social media clip, it comes to life for you. I can't explain the rationale for that, but it does. So the more that could be circulated to us, that would be amazing. It would be a request. The second is, while I loved all of the tweets, I would like to call out that the youth tweet is probably not one you should use in the next few months, because they're all hugging, and that'll be in September.
Right.
And I did have the opportunity to sit in on that launch, and I do believe that the addition of the seniors, the youth, and the parenting, it's a great, it just really consolidates reasons why people should go to HIP for some certain, I think you said it well in the seminar, this is certified, good information. It's not bogus. And so hats off to you. And I think the mural is fantastic. Well done.
I appreciate that. Yeah, so we had a conversation in Tara's town hall today about when you see groups of people together on TV or something, we're all like, we have this reaction to it. But so yes, thank you, Councillor Haslett. I'll take a look at that, Andrew, and he's listening probably right now. So we'll make sure we make that change for the youth tweets.
Thank you. Further comments or questions?
I appreciate it.
So I have one, and I raised it a while ago, and maybe even a couple of years ago, and that is, I always think of our database as being kind of a light hidden under the bushel, to be kind of biblical in a little bit. And I don't know how we really, sort of get this out into the wider public. And one of the suggestions I made at the time was, could we, for example, utilize our tax bills or our hydro bills or something like that, to something that everybody in town gets that we can put in front of them. And did that get followed up at all? I'm not sure if it did, because I'm surprised at how little the municipality at the town level or at the regional level or any of the other organizations actually promote this service. And it's such a valuable service, particularly in a time like this. Have you explored greater partnerships with the town with respect to that?
No, actually, so that's a really great suggestion, and I apologize if we haven't followed up on that. We have sort of locally, at one point we were putting our cards into the takeout bags, and we have them present still, and we are trying to do more of that outreach and training for organizations. I do have a close relationship with Service Oakville, I believe they're called, and so working with their manager and their staff, they've all been trained in the directory in the database as well, and so and our information is at Town Hall as well, but nothing sort of. I guess I'll have a conversation with Tara as well about how we move, like get into the tax bills or get into.
Sure.
To that resident promotion.
Is Colleen on the line tonight by any chance? No?
She's off.
She's off, okay. Because utilizing our tremendous resource and the commissioner responsible for library services, Colleen, she has her finger on the pulse of everything at Town Hall. That'd be useful as well. But yeah, my suggestion is tax bills, hydro bills, sending something out to the councillors to ask them to include them in our various newsletters. The communications department, I think, is key. Talking to the folks in communications to get them to potentially start including it in the communications materials that go out. The mayor's office, he puts out a daily newsletter. Having said that, my weekly newsletter comes out tomorrow, and I'll see if I can squeeze it in there as well to set a good example. But I think that utilizing the resources of the town, of the region, I think it'd be terrific. There's never a better, it's always a great time for HIP info, but the time that we're going through right now, the information that you have available has never been more critical. So I would love to see if we can utilize that partnership even more than I think you're doing now, and you're doing an amazing job at this time. So those are my 2 cents. Anything further before we receive the report from Marcus? Seeing none, can I get a motion to receive the update from Marcus? Thank you, Janet. Seconded by Susan. Thank you. Last chance for comments or questions. Any objections to the receipt? Seeing none, thank you. That is approved. And once again, thank you for your hard work, and thank your team, please, on our behalf, Marcus.
Thank you.
We'll see you next month, maybe. Okay, so next on the agenda is 6.8, the CEO update.
That's right. I just have a presentation. They're going to bring it up. The report is short. My presentation is long.
Okay, then you know what I'm going to suggest? I'm going to declare a 5-minute bio break so everybody has a chance just to shut off their Zoom for a second, stretch, Do whatever you need to do, and we'll be back at, let's have us back at 8:45. I'll give you a little bit more than 5 minutes. Okay? So 8:45. Members of the board, I'm reconvening tonight's board meeting, and where we left off, we were about to hear from our monthly presentation from our CEO. Take it away, Tara.
Perfect. Just wait for it to come up. So just to summarize, there were no changes to library service based on all the updated restrictions that came out last Friday. The majority of that impacted things related to parks and enforcement more than libraries. So our current services are library takeout, by appointment, grab-and-go bags, by appointment, OPL picks for you as requested, and then we are offering as well the computer access via appointment. Any questions about where we are related to COVID?
Members of the board, any questions?
Nope.
I don't see any. Let's move on.
Strategic plan update. So I apologize. I wasn't, due to timing, wasn't able to actually do up a report just based on when we awarded the contract and when we had our first meeting with the board, with the vendor. It was after the due date for the board package. So I'm just going to basically give an update that would normally have come through the report and ask for board feedback. So the community engagement RFP was awarded to Intent. The board remember Intent. We worked with them previously on the logo that we currently have a number of years ago. We also worked with them last year for the fundraising video that the board saw at the February board meeting. So we're excited to work with them. They have a history with us. They know us pretty well and can really hit the ground running, especially given our short timeline. So we held our first kickoff meeting a week and a half ago, and they actually came at 4:45 today. They got me the draft schedule, so I forgot to update that last one, so I do have it in here for you. So the current step that we're at is we provided them a significant amount of background information. So we provided them with statistics, with our environmental scan, as well as all the notes from the board sessions that we held, the 3 that we held in October, November, and the beginning of this year. So they could get a good sense of what the board was looking for and what kind of questions we should be narrowing in on in terms of when we do our community engagement and survey. We provided them with all the environics data that we have in order to be able to understand how our impact into the community is, as well as the various groups where we're seeing engagement and the groups that we're not seeing engagement. And they're pulling together relevant stakeholder research from other brand work that they've done with us. So the next step is really to start doing the interviews and focus groups as well as the online survey. I do have a schedule for you, but when that should start to launch, which we'll get to. But I am looking for board comment and feedback on any groups. We gave them all the background information, a list of partners, and they've started to do initial research about who they should be talking to in the community in order to get that breadth of information. Not necessarily specific residents, but more like groups and, for lack of a better word, influencers that might be able to contribute to providing information for us. So they've identified, these are the recommendations they've come forward with to date. Obviously the mayor, the MP, the MPPs, town councilors, recreation and culture. Within recreation and culture, there are numerous staff who have specific portfolios, such as the seniors programs and the special events, so having more conversations with them. The different BIAs, the youth groups, representatives from some of our closer partners, Home Sweet Hope, Kerr Street Mission, Salvation Army, and I would also put Food for Life in there as well. And then they particularly targeted library non-users because we made it very clear during that initial kickoff that that is a group that we want to get as much information from as possible. So I'm just curious, maybe we'll go slide by slide and ask if the board sees any kind of gaps or anybody else or any particular groups they would like to see us kind of address. And if you can't think of them now, feel free to email me after because I know I'm dropping it on you, but we'll make sure that this presentation gets put up for you. We can do that, right, Jessica?
I don't see the Chamber of Commerce in there.
The Chamber?
Yeah, and also school boards. and trustees particularly.
Right. Okay.
Anybody else have suggestions?
What about the Halton Multicultural Council?
Ah, yeah,
Oh,
HMC.
the HMC?
On that list.
Okay.
HMCs, that's a good one, yeah.
Okay. Oh, I duplicated the slide. My bad. They're also looking to really leverage local influencers to distribute the survey. So we'll be looking to not only OPL staff, but the board, when we eventually go to launch it, to have you help through your social medias to push that out. We'll be working closely with the mayor's office and town communications as well for that. Reach out to MPs and MPPs to see if they can assist in potentially pushing that out. We're going to reach out to the councillors and probably reach out to both Councillor Hassett-Dale and Councillor Knoll to help us kind of coordinate to your colleagues on council. We do have some relationships existing with the BIA, so we'll start those conversations to see how we can get that out. As I mentioned, the town of Oakville, we've been working more closely with them, particularly over the past year in their communications area, so how can we kind of leverage those? The different residents associations, Intent has identified all the different residents associations. I might actually reach out to the councillors, because one of the problems we have with the Residents Association is finding key contacts for them. So we might reach out, I might start with Councillor Hassett-Dale. I know you have some really strong relationships with your residents associations, and start with there, as well as our community partners. But also you look at different Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram influencers and groups. They've identified a number of really popular Facebook groups, the Mommy and Me groups. There's Oakville Anything and Everything group that have significant number of members. So how can we get our surveys posted up in there, as well as engaging, there's a number of Instagram influencers who have some pretty significant followings in the area.
Oh, by the way, Steve Bright just sent me a note, Oakville Community Foundation wasn't
yep.
on there either. And when you mention mommy's groups, you have to be fair, because there's also an Oakville
Daddy
Daddies
groups,
group.
yes.
Yeah.
It was on the list.
It's Oakville Dads.
Yeah.
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 We don't call ourselves daddies.
Oh. So when we actually get to that point, I'll probably reach out to the board as well and ask if they have any, because we do have staff and people who are connected to some of these groups, but just to see what kind of connections that any of you have as well to really leverage the board the best we can. So Intent has indicated these number of items as success indicators for getting the survey out. So obviously the number of surveys completed by OPL staff, there'll be a dedicated survey and focus groups for staff. Number of surveys completed by the Oakville community, but also how do we get our reach out into the community and how does that translate into surveys completed? So number of mentions, number of people attending the OPL workshop, which is the town hall that we spoke about back in February. Number of clicks on the QR codes from the postcards that'll be distributed, and then did we hit the different demographics that we're looking to do. We've also talked with Intent about our desire to continue to engage and support local businesses. So we're looking to do this in two ways. In order to promote the survey, we're going to have our gift cards as kind of incentive for completing it. And those will be to locally owned businesses in order to support those. And then we will start conversations with businesses that we have had a relationship with. There are some restaurants that we've worked with and potential opportunities through the BIAs to whether or not we can include a survey postcard with a QR code into some of their takeout orders. We'll obviously put it through all our takeout orders as well, but wherever else we can kind of get it in front of people to the best of our ability. One more. So it is a really ambitious timeline. We are jumping on it pretty quickly. The staff survey is set to go out April 30th and will run for a number of weeks. The public survey will go out April 30th. It'll be a relatively soft launch. Our purpose is to get it out as soon as possible and then push out promotion in the coming weeks, particularly if as information comes in. We know that we're missing specific demographics. We may do targeted promotion in those different demographics. Joe and I have already had a conversation about, paid promotion and how that will also layer into that. The stakeholder workshops with the different groups that have been identified, that includes both the workshops, the focus groups, and the interviews, will be the week of May 10th. The town hall, we're looking at the week of May 7th. The final analysis, intent will do that during the week of June 14th to 18th. And then the final presentation of findings and recommendations to the board will come to the June board meeting, which will then allow us in July and August to take the information that we have to date and really kind of start building the strategic plan in time for budget prep in September, October. So that is a very quick and high-level update of where we are. Happy to take any questions or comments about any of that.
Can I suggest that for the June 24th meeting that you either clear the deck for that meeting or set up a separate meeting?
Okay.
Just so we have enough time to really delve into it and do it justice.
Give it the appropriate time. Yeah, I was thinking about that. It will really depend on keeping a close eye on what we can potentially put in May and then not necessarily have in June and dedicate that whole meeting to this. So, yeah.
I mean, if you can't, canvass to see if you can potentially set up a separate meeting as well. Yeah.
Yep, we can do that too.
Members of the board, any questions up to this juncture? Janet has her hand up. Go ahead.
Are we going to see the survey before it goes out, or did I miss something?
If you want to see the survey before it comes out, it would have to come to the board meeting in May, which would push us back about a month.
Well, could you circulate it to us? And
I don't know.
It's mildly tricky to technically, as soon as you.
It's work of the board.
If she sends it out and you guys have a group email about it, you're conducting board business, that's technically deemed a meeting. It's not supposed to happen.
right. Janet?
Well, sorry, my internet seems to be unstable, but well, we're sending something out that's pretty significant, that's going to gather data that we're going to rely on. I don't want to push back the date, but I'm a bit surprised we're not going to see the survey before it goes out. That's my comment.
Who actually prepared the survey?
Intent is bringing recommendations. They're designing the survey.
Okay.
That's one of the reasons that we hired a third party, was to bring their level of expertise. We have provided them with the surveys that Vancouver, Toronto, and Kitchener used recently for theirs as just a sample of what we were looking for.
Okay, anybody further? Let's move on.
Okay. So next is the Glen Abbey exterior renovation, which updates were provided in the package. The project is still green. Its completion date is at this point is fall 2021, with official opening targeted for 2022 in the spring. We are in the midst of public consultation. If you're following any of our social or our e-newsletter, you would have seen that go out. So this is just a high-level look, and again, I think a reiteration, but didn't have the before picture, which I think is important. So that's what that space currently looks like, and what you're seeing with the after is the current concept drawing that we went to. You will notice that there's been a change in the fence. We have moved away from that original image with the potential piece of art embedded in it. And that was after discussions with Rec and Culture. They had some security concerns about it, as well as just conversations about cost with that. So we've moved to a more traditional kind of wooden fence that I think really complements the overhang. So these are just close-ups of that, but they were in your package. So the public consultation runs for the next number of weeks. So far, we've actually received some pretty good results and some really positive comments related to it. So we're excited to get that. So when we have that complete, we'll bring that back to the board. And then the website project didn't get a report because there isn't, I didn't feel there was enough to actually justify a whole new report for you to read. Everything continues to go well. The Pixel Shop is a solid company, and we're really excited to be working with them. Single sign-on, the quality assurance was completed by IS. Testing was then taken over by Joe and his team, and we did find some flaws. So it is back to Pixel Shop to kind of resolve those. We don't anticipate that it will have any impact on the final timelines. All the OPL look and feel items were finalized. Federated search, which I think that's what I'm most excited about. We had to create a whole new method in order to index the catalog. So we've just finalized that process with our vendor, Cersei Dynex. But previously, we have completed the OPL website, events, and HIP federated search backend indexes. So those are all completed. So once we actually get the catalog indexing completed, they'll be able to finalize the federated search, which is the last really significant piece. And I think that's targeted for mid-May. So we'll have a much stronger update at the next board meeting. And then I do believe we're still on target to show the board what it looks like shortly around that time, actually.
Give them access.
Yep.
The federated search, that includes API access to our various databases and such as well? Okay, so you universal searching across all of our assets.
Yeah. And it's beautiful, actually. It's all divided, so that programming doesn't get lost. This is what the collections is, this is what the programs are,
Nice.
This is what HIP is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
If anybody wants to ask a question, I can see everybody now on the side of the screen. Just wave at me furiously and I'll stop. Not seeing any furious waving or even passive waving.
Sheridan Innovator Accelerator in March, the board asked for an update with this. So we had our last meeting with them last week, a week from Tuesday, and the teams were just right now are completing their development of their solution and their pitch video. They're going to be provided to us this Monday, actually probably late Sunday, and then we'll have to view them and get back to Sheridan within basically the next day, and then their closing session. And I have my dates really wrong there. The closing session's actually been rescheduled to the 29th. So we will give them the finalist, the winner, on the Tuesday, and then the closing session where that gets announced is the Thursday. At one point, we did talk about board members being involved with that. Given the tight turnaround, I'm not sure it's appropriate for the full board, but whether or not one or two representatives from the board think they have the time to do that in that 24 hours to get back to us, we'd be happy to, if somebody wants to be involved with that.
Any volunteers? Andrew wants to volunteer, Susan wants to volunteer, Janet wants to volunteer.
Okay.
So you've got 3 volunteers. I will not because I will probably not have the time to do that in that window because I've got police business all that week. So
That's fair. So that's great. So I will make sure that all 3 of you are included with that, and you can get us your vote back on that, and we'll follow up. I'm excited to see them. Some of them were I'm excited to see how they all kind of come. Some of the ideas I'm actually really quite excited about and actually could see us implement. Others, I'm excited to see where they ended up.
Hey, speaking of voting, I'm sorry to change the subject. I don't remember the result. I didn't remember ever seeing the results from the voting on the staff Halloween pumpkin contest. Did that get sent out? Mm-hmm. I don't know if I ever saw it. I guess I must have missed it.
Okay.
Okay.
I can see if I can't dig up that email and resend it.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Okay.
Thank you. These are important things, you know.
That was
I heard,
very
yeah.
important. And then Jill provided a spring fundraising campaign update. So we're about 50% complete of that campaign. The current return on investment is about 540%, so we're excited about that. We've received 69 gifts in total as of April 19th. We've received just over $7,000. I do know that we've gotten some in this week as well. Thank you and email letters were sent out, and then we have some follow-ups that will continue to happen over the next couple weeks to kind of bring this fundraising campaign to a close. So just to remind, it consisted of reaching out to about 474 current and lapsed donors. Second emailer was just sent out. mailer. We did follow up with emails to our donor subscribers. And as I said, yeah, a reminder postcard went out and should have been received last week. And then we did use a mix of both paid and organic social media to kind of push that out. Hopefully some of you saw it through your feeds. I certainly did. It was exciting to kind of see it all come up. And we're very interested to see how it all kind of plays out in the end and do a kind of review of where we were successful and where we can improve for our fall fundraising campaign. Okay. Any questions?
Questions on fundraising? No?
That's actually it. So I may have overpromised.
You overpromised
I did.
on this extra long.
I did. Well, I wasn't sure about the strategic plan because sometimes we have big discussions about that. So I wanted to make sure that, to let you know I was open to those conversations.
Okay. So members of the board, any follow-up questions on anything you saw or of the CEO? Oh, Janet.
Tara, it's in regards to the design for the new Northern Library. So exciting that it's going to move forward and that you guys are working on it. And so I saw it in the report. Can you tell me what the intent would be for the current 16-mile building?
Sure, I can tell you kind of high level. It is built to move. So we did make sure of that. So it can be placed somewhere else. There is no designated space for it. At the time, we were planning to move it from 16 Mile over to Palermo, but that's when we were doing the build in roughly 2026 to 2028. So we have started to have some conversations with the town that if that does get accelerated, do we have a space identified in Palermo where we own land where we could put it in until that library gets built. I forget when that one is actually planned out, or whether or not it can be repurposed somewhere else. But it definitely will be repurposed, whether through the library or whether through the town.
So as you're having those discussions, I'd be interested to participate in some way to talk about whether or not there's a better solution for Clearview. Because the current library, as everyone knows, does not provide services to the community until after the school closes. And it is to the disadvantage of a community that really would love to have a connection during the day and to have a facility that they call home and they belong to. And the current facility just struggles to do that. And people have disengaged to some degree. And if there's an opportunity to talk about it possibly moving to a different location, I'd like for at least some consideration to be given to Clearview.
No, absolutely. I mean, right now we are concentrating on the design of the North Park complex, and should we receive funding to actually move forward with that, that's definitely when we'd ramp up the discussions about where that facility, the current facility, would go, for sure.
Thank you.
Anything further? I'm not seeing anything. Can I get, oh, I'm sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Tara, for your brief, long presentation.
Sorry.
The Glen Abbey exterior, the renderings look interesting. I'm curious, when it comes back to the board for approval, will there maybe be multiple layers or multiple designs that we'll be looking at, or maybe like a base level and then an enhanced level, or what can we expect that's going to come back?
We've never brought the design for approval. We do bring it back, and we do invite the board to provide feedback.
Okay, well, it's a capital investment. I thought we'd have to, have some input on that, but okay, thank you.
I can say that while we don't get formal approval, we do have a fair amount of authority to send things back, and we've done
Correct.
that in the past. So the Glen Abbey renovation had strong influence of the board in getting some changes made. So I don't think you should be concerned that we can have input. So.
Okay, thanks.
Any further comments, questions? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Can I get a motion to receive the CEO's report, please? Moved by Susan and seconded by Bill. Thank you very much. Last chance for comments or questions. Objections to the receipt of the report? Seeing none, that is received. Members of the board, our last matter of business before new business, and I don't believe we have any new business. I'm going to ask for that now so that we can, when we adjourn, when we come out of confidential, we'll be able just to adjourn. Is there any new business to come before the board tonight? I don't see any. Okay, so with respect to item number 7, which is the QP 5348 negotiations update, I would like a motion to go into closed session. And the reason for going into closed session, which is allowed under the Municipal Act, is respecting labor relations or employee negotiations. So can I get a motion to go into closed session? Janet and Stephen, thank you very much. Any objections to going into closed session? I do not see any objections going to closed session. So I will, before we do that, and I ask the clerk and IT to set up the room for that, I want to thank anybody that's watching tonight, and I imagine that we have some staff and members of the public watching this evening. Thank you for your interest and your participation through your watching and feedback for our board meetings. We really appreciate it. And to the staff that are leaving, thank you very much for all your contributions. Joe and Simona, good night. And with that, we are going to close session.
Okay. Bella, thank you.
Just hit the in-camera button.
Oh, yes, right, of course.
It should be reasonably well understood that each piece was made by hand, and that each image is different for that reason. So it's very clear that I'm not using any sort of mass-produced or mass production technique. What I'm using are tools and my own hands to carve each piece out individually. This is really about the handmade process or the maker's mark in that sense. The process of throwing, essentially, whether you're making a cup or a vase or a bowl, the process is essentially the same. It starts with wedging your clay, preparing the clay, making sure it's nice and even and consistent for throwing. You want to avoid air bubbles or chunks or bits. So you wedge that clay to get it nice and even. It goes onto the wheel. First step is centering, which involves holding the clay in place so that, basically the whole idea is not to force the clay, but to be nice and steady so that the clay centers itself onto the wheel, at which point you're ready to open it up. What most people love about clay is the feeling that it provides infinite possibility and opportunity. It may look like mud at first glance, but it's basically mud that can hold its shape, that can be carved, it can be wheel thrown, it can be pressed into sheets, it can be shaped into pretty much any idea that comes to mind, provided it has a physical form, or it can express things without physical form in a different way as well. It really is a material without much limitation, except for the limitation that we provide. So it has the opportunity to provide almost a limitless canvas for the artist. All right. So I've centered, I've opened up the pot. Now I'm ready to pull up the wall, just basically getting the height of the piece. It took me at least 2 years to become a proficient thrower, like to a point where I was happy with what was coming out. But at this point, I've had about 15 years worth of throwing experience, and I can honestly say that my throwing is better now than it was in the past. Although it's changed to some degree as well, but it's definitely an ongoing process because there's always room to grow. There's fine tuning that happens in each shape. So the more it's one of those activities. The more you do, the better you become at it. And then after you've pulled, you're going to do the fine tuning details in terms of adjusting the shape. So pretty much everything starts with a cylindrical form, and then you sort of work your way out from there. think for most clay artists, the process is definitely very personal from beginning to end. So we think of an idea, and then it's our job to bring that idea to life into an object, or a sculptural piece, or what have you. But it's a personal process. It's a journey where we have to give something a life of its own. What I love about the potter's wheel is partly just the process. It's an enjoyable process to work with the wheel, but also it provides a degree of structure. It can help you generate a shape much faster than building at the table. But then it's up to the individual or the artist to understand what they can do with that shape. If it can become more than what it is, if it's necessary, or if it isn't, it's simply a beautiful shape on its own. I've been teaching here at Queen Elizabeth Park Community Cultural Center for roughly 2.5 years.
I pushed my button.
Oh.
There we go. And we're back. So I will report that we met in closed session to address matters of labor relations or employee negotiations. I'll look for a motion to receive the verbal report that was provided in camera. Susan and Bill, any objection to receiving the motion? That is carried. Thank you very much. I canvassed the board for new business. We didn't see any before, so we're going to move on to the time and date of next meeting, which is in fact Thursday, May 27th, 2021, 7 o'clock. It's once again a virtual meeting, and we will see you there. Members of the board, I look for a motion at this time to adjourn. And that's Stephen and Susan. Thank you very much. Any objections to adjourning? I dare you. And that's carried, and we are adjourned. Thank you, members of the board, for your time and attention tonight, and for all your hard work. Thank you very much. We'll see you next month.